everyone. I'm Jason Schwartz, your host of the Neutral Zone. We know we only have so many weeks until the Maui County primaries, and we don't have enough weeks for all the people to be on my show once a week. So I came into the field. We're here at Maui College.
Yeah, community college.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We used to be community. Now we're considered a university.
Oh, yeah.
But whatever it is, we are here at the college. Thank you very much for hosting this spot. I'm here with Amy Petterson.
Yep. Hello.
Amy Petterson is running for mayor of Maui here in 2026. We have a crowded field, and the other night we were at the Kihei Community Association gathering, and they were asking a few questions of each candidate, but they had 10 people, 9 people there. And so you really couldn't get to know people too much. And for candidates that don't have big budgets, getting up close and personal with a little time, so they have a forum to be able to share themselves. And Amy was a standout, and they were asking you questions, and some of the people were skirting the answers, but you actually volunteered ideas. It's like, wow, how about that?
Yeah.
Someone that,
Yeah, I try to do all my research before going on stage.
well, talking about doing research, you're, how old are you now?
I'm going to be 25 in July.
So, in your 25 years, for you to come to a time when you said, I want to run for mayor of Maui, and I think now's the right time. What's that about?
Well, to be honest, there's a lot of different things at play here. So there is the federal changes and the state changes. With how things are going and how we're dealing with our problems, we're too reactive. We've never been proactive enough to prevent these issues. And, you know, I've been here my whole life. My family has been here for 5 generations, and a lot of that hasn't changed. You know, 40 years ago, we had like, you know, the wealthy actually pay their taxes. We had, we even had an income cap, technically. So then that way, you know, more money wasn't going to these CEOs, it was actually going to the people. However, you know, 40 years ago, Ronald Reagan helped change that. And instead of fixing that issue for people on the island, they left it. And, you know, when I was talking to Miss Yuki Lei, she didn't want to change it either. And, you know, what we can do to try and fix that is at least taxing these wealthy landowners that don't live here a surcharge. So this is something that's already being implemented in New York, but it's also done in Paris and in Canada. And so what this entails is you basically charge people who have like a property worth more than 5 million, you charge them a surcharge if they're not living here. So they don't have like renters, or they don't have any family living there. Nobody occupies that space. And that's something we can do to instead charge the wealthy what they need to be charged, so we can fund programs that help the rest of the community. And, you know, that's my biggest thing I want to implement, because we can't help people if we don't charge the people who don't respect this island and don't even live here.
Well, okay, I'm not here to debate the, I'm thinking,
don't
my
worry.
first thought was, my first thought was, I wonder how many properties that is, and what kind of a dollar amount we're talking, because politicians, you'll find them as you grow older, say a lot, but when they get in, they say, wait a minute, I've had all these great ideas, but I can't do them alone. I have to get some kind of consensus. So if you were mayor and you have ideas, some of them have to go before a council and before the public, and they may not be supportive. So the greatest ideas are there. So, like you say, going in, you like to do your research so that you know what you're talking about. But the thing about taxing people, you just, as you were telling me, I was hearing loopholes. Oh, if I'm someone that isn't here, I can put someone in there and avoid this penalty. So, like, they're always, what do they say? They're always solutions that are, what are I was just going to use and talk about our president. I should.
It's okay. I have feelings, very strong feelings, but I understand. Yeah. Well, the thing that's actually pretty wonderful about that is because, like, even if that were to be the case, you're still having people in homes, you know? And a lot of times, these rich, wealthy families who just have these homes to vacation in once a year, they don't want people staying in there anyway. So that way, even if they put people in the homes to skirt the issue, you're still having people in the home. And most of the time, they buy these properties that are so expensive that they're not going to want to rent them out regardless. But for them, it'd be a double-edged sword. They can either just pay the extra funds, or they can actually house people that need it.
Why would they want to keep that property?
Well, I don't know why they'd want to keep it, but
no, if you're going to be charging them a surcharge,
yeah.
So you're forcing them into some kind of action with their property. They've got to decide, well, why do I have this property? Is it worth it with all this extra charge? And if not, and they sell it, then what happens?
Well, so first of all,
see what I'm saying?
I exactly understand what you're saying. Well, actually, Hawaii already has an estate tax, right? So, just for example, Oprah has a very large estate, so she pays tax on that. When you have a property that's over $5 million, and that's your second property you don't reside in, they're more likely just to pay the surcharge than to sell it, because they already have the funds to buy a $5 million home while not even living in there. But that might not be the case for all buyers, or
I'm just looking at it, because sometimes people buy property, they buy and hold.
Yes.
Right, and they and they hold and hold and hold.
Yep.
I remember someone saying, "That's the secret, is you don't sell, you just keep buying, and it keeps going on to your financial statement." Because if you were asked about your liquidity, you don't have liquidity, you have assets.
Yep.
Those are two different things.
And actually, ironically, not to go back to Reagan, but that used to be taxed too when you have assets like that. We don't do that anymore. So if they do end up selling this property, they likely won't be able to sell it for as high as they want, unless they're selling it to other rich people who are willing to pay that surcharge. Because $5 million, I mean, most people here can't even pay $1 million for a home. And right now, the medium home medium home cost is $800,000. That's more than most people here can afford. I mean, 45% of renters spend 30% of their income on renting. And I think it's about...
Is that right? They say that. I wonder what the reality is.
Well, I think it's about like 50% of those 45 people, like 45% of people, spend more than 60% of their income on renting. And that is insane. I mean, we have the highest cost of living out of any state, but we're given the bare minimum and told it's progress. This isn't progress. We're pricing people out of their homes by not, implementing this surcharge or implementing rental control. I mean, how can people afford to live in their own home state when we're not giving them the opportunity to do so?
How do we do that?
Well, first, if we implement this surcharge, more funds can go into like affordable housing projects or interim housing for the homeless, which is something they only recently started discussing. And when they started discussing this during, I'm not sure if it was a council meeting, but it was some kind of meeting last week, where they wanted to take like old dormitories to make interim housing for the homeless. And that's something I've been wanting to do for a while now. And Lanai has something similar, but we are so reactive that this should have been implemented 10 plus years ago. And that's something they even brought up in the meeting. So frustrating.
There's an expression. Sometimes people are so busy handling current issues that they don't have enough arms and legs and budget to get to it. And that's probably the hardest thing about your job as mayor,
budgeting.
is trying to have $1 go 5 ways.
Yep. We are so reactive about these issues that, we're falling behind like the other islands. For example, not just the homeless housing, but Maui in particular only has one agricultural park, where in comparison, both Oahu and Hawaii have 4 parks each. We are falling behind.
An agricultural park, what does it do?
So basically, an agricultural park is where locals can lease land to create produce. Well, I should say grow produce, or I guess you'd call it like ornamental plants, but a lot of it is to grow produce for the island. And so we should have had more parks than we do now, so we can actually like encourage local farmers to grow produce for other residents, for them to purchase, and actually support people in more ways than just tourism. Tourism is important. Unfortunately, that's just the truth. But we can be putting more into actually incentivizing new businesses, such as farmers, or even using county land to create other properties that locals can lease from the county to start their businesses, instead of just relying on contractors to develop some other area, and then they have to pay maybe like 5 times more just to lease that property. We have the land and the resources to contribute to our economy in a way that uplifts locals, instead of just relying on big businesses, which big businesses are important, but we can't just survive off of them. If you don't have competition, you're just going to be stuck with the bare minimum, or even less than that.
How do you stop? How do you create competition unless you have dollars to be able to compete?
Yeah. Well, for example, this year they raised the tax on short-term rentals, right? Which is fair. I understand why they're doing that, especially with Bill 9 in play. But at the same time, they left the taxes on hotels the same. And at that point, now you're not incentivizing competition. You are instead targeting, I shouldn't say targeting, but you're putting more of a focus on these short-term rentals instead of hotels. The taxes on hotels haven't raised for about, I want to say almost 3 years now. And they brought them down during COVID, and then they raised it by almost $1, and then it's been stagnant since. And at that point, you can't just say, oh, we'll tax these short-term rentals, but we'll leave hotels the same, because now you're not creating competition anymore, and that's what harms our economy. If you have something like this where you're just taxing one side more, then you're immediately harming how our community, our economy, and how residents can manage their own livelihoods on the island. So that is one way we can incentivize competition, is by properly taxing both sides. So then that way, it's spread out.
Let's say you wanted to do that. You wanted to properly tax both sides.
Yeah.
And now we go into the discussion about it part. We could say that all the council people are independent thinkers, but we've seen influences in some of their opinions.
Yeah.
Somehow. I don't exactly like to. Accusations are never really important. But I also think, because tourism has been such an important part, there could be pushback like, hey, we just keep taxing these hotels and keep taxing these hotels, and short-term rentals have different advantages. And short-term rentals are a big issue when you have not enough houses for the long-term rentals.
Well, they say that short-term rentals take up, well, the reports are a little different, but the highest amount of short-term rentals is 1 in 5 houses, 1 in 7 houses in the state. So that's why I can see why they would tax them more. But at the same time, it's yes, you have to tax them more, because if you're doing this while you're taking up all this housing, I understand, because you're also doing it for a profit. But at the same time, if you just leave hotels as they are, I'm not saying tax them unfairly, but just so if you raise one side, you have to raise the other, just so it's more fair than it is now.
Be an interesting discussion. You watch them wrestling during budget season.
I know.
I really think the biggest wrestle is, there's need in so many areas. And you got to get the money in, but after a while, everyone is saying, how I can't, like you're saying.
Exactly, yeah.
So it's the greatest laid plans don't always happen the way you want them to.
Yep, and I think we should be focusing a lot on self-funded plans. Like, obviously the county cannot just fund everything for like 10 plus years if it's so high in cost. But if you have something, for example, my interim housing plan was to instead create apartments and separate them by men, women, and families, just in case co-housing issues occur. But if you create these apartments, they can stay there for 2 months without paying. And then after 2 months, they pay $200 a month. So then that way, it's a very low cost for them while also encouraging them to return to society in a healthy way. They have locked doors, they have privacy, and that's something people who are facing homelessness need, because you can't just leave them on the side of the road,
There's a lot of that going on.
Yeah, but if you have it so they pay a small cost each month, you can self-fund the program without having to take so much from the county when that money could go to other programs. So, for example, if you have a building that's say like, let's say 150 units just for like one apartment building.
150 units.
Yeah, you can get at least $200,000 a year. That's at least, if not all those units are, filled. And then that way, all those funds can go back into the program, and so the residents don't have to be upset. Some people may be upset that their tax dollars are going to it, which I understand. But then that way,
when I'm listening, the only thing that goes into my mind is, like you just used numbers, and every time I look at it, I think 200 times this, and you do the math, you got 200,000. 200,000 used to be a lot of money. You can't even buy a fifth of a house.
I know.
What makes you think that's going to pay for a program for self-funding programs to give them little money means someone else had to come up with money.
Yeah.
Who is that?
Well, it'd be the county, but outside of initial cost, then we can actually make this more self-funded. Obviously, initial cost is always going to be something.
It's like they took and converted an old dormitory. Remember that one?
Yep.
And they spent how much? $16 million?
Yeah, but you know what?
It may not have been. It might have been 5, whatever.
Well, it depends.
These numbers are staggering.
Yeah.
So
well, the thing
all
is,
the people working and getting paid healthy. There's been like when things happened in the West Side and we had a crisis, people came out of the woodwork and did their work for nothing.
Yeah.
Well, we have a crisis that's larger than just Lana.
Yes.
Are we going to find people giving and not as much?
Not as much, but you see, a lot of companies love how do you say it? Philanthropy? Is that how you say it?
Well, I've learned that philanthropy very many times means that if we give this, we're going to save on taxes.
Yeah.
And so part of our motivation is we want to be able to keep more of our money for ourselves.
Yep.
And so we're going to give this away. I agree. Maui's philanthropy base, I can imagine, is only a fraction of what we need it to be to support some of these programs we're talking about.
Yeah, but if you think about it, so recently there's been discussions about buying a private water system. And so they put $30 million on the side to purchase this system. That's not counting how much you have to actually pay workers to, check the system, to run the system. But clearly, we have the funds to at least do one big project a year. Now, I'm not saying we should be doing that, especially if our budget is so tight.
When you say we have the funds, I'm trying to understand. Where do we have them?
Well, a lot of our taxes, state-wise, come from GETs, which is basically put on the consumer. That isn't something I can change as a mayor because that is a state tax, but we do get funding from that for the county. Instead, I would like to, again, going back to that surcharge, I'd like to put that surcharge on these, like, I guess you call it non-residential homes if you're looking at the tax rates. Put a higher surcharge on these homes so then that way we can get those funds to help these people. When you think about it, people who only come here once a year because they bought a vacation home, they're not paying these GDTs. They're not paying the other taxes that residents have to pay.
They, well, I'm not sure which properties you're talking about because most of them are rented out, aren't they?
No, there's a lot of.
Oh, you're talking a very, very expensive.
Oh yeah, over
elite
5
properties.
million, yeah.
5 million is becoming sadly more common.
I know. Yeah,
I mean-
but I mean, if somebody has a $5 million home and they live in it, they would not face this tax. It's only for people who that's not their primary residence and they don't rent it out.
Again,
Yeah.
when I'm hearing these programs, if you were mayor and saying that, they'd say, okay, we got to do a study. We got to budget $50,000 to
Yep.
be able to study to see whether we're going to do this. Right.
Yeah.
Because the numbers would have to be looked at really
Yeah.
closely.
Well, the thing is too, is like Maui is such a, I wouldn't say it's the biggest vacation spot out of the islands, but it's up there. And you know, property, when it went down during COVID, a lot of people bought up property, which is, you know, fair. It was a lower market, you go for it. But since that happened, a lot of these properties aren't going to, you know, locals or people who even live here or moved here to live here. It was very much, oh, this land is open, we can buy this as a vacation, like, home. We don't have to rent it out. It can just be our vacation home.
Well, I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, well, this young lady is 25 years old. I can probably run back the tape 25 years and find the same problem.
Yep.
Exactly.
And you know what? That's why I'm running, because we had this issue for decades, you know, and they didn't change it. You know, this is why we need rental control. You know, it's just getting out of hand. And, you know, with the current economy, it's just going to get worse.
How can you control a rent when it's based on what?
Well, so what they do in New York, sorry to keep going back to New
No,
York.
it's okay.
But New York is very much, they have very good systems because it's so expensive to live there. So what they have is a maximum base rent. And this is decided by a board in New York City, specifically for New York City, not the whole of New York. So this board basically has meetings every year that people can go and, you know, speak about what is, you know, how high the rent cost is, or, you know, they're public officials trying to sway it, either good or bad. And then you have researchers and, you know, landowners, renters. All these people will go to this board with, you know, their personal experiences, their research, and they'll be like, we need to change this so it's more affordable to people. That way it's community driven and it's fair, using research and testimony.
And many of the owners would say, who are these people that are not owners, that don't have to pay the expenses for these properties, are declaring and giving me a ceiling on what I can charge?
Yeah.
How is that fair to me as an owner?
Well, if you're an owner and say you bought a property with a cottage on the side, this law and commission, I personally call it commission, so that way it, you know, it dictates boards of different districts, like, you know, Upcountry and West Maui. But if you're, say you're a house owner that bought a property and it has a cottage in the back, you're gonna obviously use that cottage to pay your mortgage. But when you do that, and you're like, oh, I can use this cottage to pay off on my mortgage, it's fair. But you also have to think, if everybody is doing that, mortgages will get more expensive because banks know, oh, now they can use this property to rent out and pay a higher mortgage. And, sorry, there's so many flies. If you have rental control, it will help in lowering these mortgages because banks know, oh, they can't afford to do this. Nobody will be able to afford to do this. We actually have to go less on mortgages. Right now, it's 7%. That is extremely high. And, you know, most people here won't be able to afford that. And banks know, oh, they're just gonna rent out this property, they'll be able to afford it.
Well, it's interesting. When I hear it's high, I've been in living longer. I remember 18%.
Yeah, that's...
You're talking
We're trying
7.
not to get there.
You know, literally, there was in the early 2000s, when there was an explosion in the mortgage business because they had negative amortization loans that gave
goodness.
people an opportunity, if they were in a crisis, to pay a much smaller amount and add to the principal balance. And they were told when they were taking out the loan that this is really to be used for emergencies only. And that's not what people did. They went that way, and they got in because they figured they could afford that low one. And mortgages were being done on stated income. So it was the Wild West. And through that period, the prices kept going up and up and up of properties. And they always justify by the higher values. That's why they're charging. So I would find that an interesting study. I don't know how that would come out when all is said and done.
I know.
What other things are you in? Because I know you ran with lots of ideas, and that's why I think this is a valuable thing. Because whether or not you become mayor, I would say, you would even guess, it's that would be quite a long shot.
Well,
some of these people have, I mean, I now know Amy Petterson. Everybody up there hopefully will know Amy Petterson.
Well, I hope so. And
but now, how many people will see this?
Exactly.
If your name is Rick Bisson or Yuki or you have money, you can get them, you can put it in places. So that's a real limitation. So this is sort of a time when, if at the best case scenario, your ideas get put on the calendar and start becoming part of the agenda to move things forward. To me, that's the value of having a candidate like yours. I do this as a gift. This is a gift to the public to know there's someone that's coming along.
I'm sure many appreciate
that will be coming out and being in the forum again, and is going to learn through this process what she needs to improve and get better, and how things work. The people that I see that are running for council, it seems that the ones that have been most successful, the ones that sort of plant themselves there a couple of years before and watch all the procedures and see what's happening, because I don't know. There's a real big question on what's going to happen to our county. The people that live here, like you're talking about, you've been here 5 generations. I can't imagine your 5 generations are, after all, can they buy those $5 million properties?
Nope.
I wouldn't think so.
You know what? My great-great-grandfather, he was in the same position we're in now. A lot of his siblings left the islands because they couldn't afford it. The only reason he got to stay is because he found a good job. That's the only reason he got to stay. And, that's still an issue now. And it hasn't changed. And that's what's just so frustrating, as somebody of a younger generation, to have people who are older than me who have seen these issues for years and they don't want to change it. When you look at, not to drag any names or anything, but when you look at all the big names, P. Denise, Yukile, Bisson, they all have homes. They all already have homes. They're much older than me and they have good jobs. But that's not the same for, most people in my generation or the generation before me. And so they're not going to implement something like rental control. They're just not going to do it. They haven't spoken about it. Bisson may have done Bill 9 in an attempt to make things affordable, but opening more houses to the people doesn't make things affordable. You actually have to implement something that focuses on affordability with what we have. And they haven't done it. In particular, a lot of these rental places.
When you say they haven't done it, I'm not debating, but they're doing all that they think they can afford. Budget is such a thing.
It is, yes, it definitely is.
Because we all are, really, our fantasy is we need this and we need that. And it would only be better if we do this and do that. And then we figure, where is, Daddy Warbucks to pay for this? Because nobody wants to pay for it.
Exactly. And I hate to bring it back, but they grew up in a time where, the people who made more money paid properly. They grew up in that time and they saw the changes, but instead of, you know, trying to change things, at least for this county, they didn't do that. You know,
well, why? And we know
exactly,
why.
yeah.
Because they run every 2 years,
Yep.
and their focus in the middle of their term is they've got to run again and
Yep.
raise money just to get that little job again. And
that's how I feel about Bill 9. Bill 9 has its merits, but it should have happened years ago. When the fires first happened, Bisson was in either his like first term, I believe.
he's still in his first term.
The first year of his first term, of course, yeah. But he could have implemented that back then. You know, when houses are still desperately in need now, but when that fire happened, that would have been the time to implement it. And, you know,
He didn't have that authority.
well, did he not have that authority, or did he not choose that time, you know?
Well, Bill 9 was passed by the council, for example.
Yeah.
So he really didn't have the authority.
Yeah, but he could have brought it up so many years ago.
could have.
Yeah.
Okay.
But back then, you know, I like to call it the Airbnb boom. 3 years ago, we weren't in such a like crazy like dire straits of all these non-residents are buying vacation rentals because of this Airbnb boom. We would not be in this situation of so many like short-term vacation rentals if this law was placed 3 years ago. And even then, it didn't have to be the extent of what Bill 9 is now. It could have just banned vacation rentals in these zones and then moved on to phasing them out. Because that way, we would tackle the problem before it hit us. We did not do that. So now we're trying to make up for it by phasing out these rentals as quickly as possible. When if you do that, you are opening the way to lawsuits. It is a good idea, but it was short-sighted and it should have happened sooner. It should have been, okay, this is, you know, we're stopping this from happening. You cannot buy these like rentals and turn them into short-term rentals in apartment zones. And then down the line, you could say, okay, now that we have stopped this, there's still some, so we're going to try and phase them out. That way, you know, you have a period of time where people are like, okay, this isn't profitable anymore. We can't just, you know, buy out these homes that locals need and then go, oh, we'll turn them into short vacation rentals.
But you already said it. Buying homes that locals need that they can't afford.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, when they buy out these apartment zones, obviously they're putting in the money to, you know, fancy it up. And then at that point, obviously they can't afford it anymore because they spent thousands and thousands of dollars turning these into short-term vacation rentals. But if you stop them from doing that before it happened, these apartments would have been more affordable for locals.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just, you know, when I'm thinking, because I've lived here so long, and like you're thinking back 3 years, thinking we could have nipped it in the bud. And I'm thinking, I remember 15, 20 years ago talking to people, and they're talking the same thing.
I know, isn't it so frustrating?
Same thing. So don't think for a second I'm discounting what you're saying. I'm just saying,
I know.
These problems, if they were as easy, maybe that doesn't, you know, we pass these, but I think that's easy.
Yeah.
But you just said, you pass a bill and you've created potential lawsuits.
Yep.
now. And I don't think, and then you see that the mayor also kind of pushed through and helped to get a bill to gut many of the things that were in Bill 9.
Yeah.
So the questions are, well, was that fully well thought out before, and all the drama that's happened and everything? So we're up to about here in it.
Yep. You know what you're mentioning is exactly my point.
Well, what other areas are interesting? Interesting. Obviously, there's lots of different areas. Housing is absolutely powerful and important.
Yep.
What other ideas you have that you'd want to deliver?
There's so many ideas I have. I mean, like on my website, I have like over 20 different policies. It's hard to get through them all. But one in particular that, you know, I've been thinking about since I worked in the Lahaina fire cleanup is I talked about it during the forum in Kihei. It's called water buns or earth smiles. They're basically little like smiles carved into the earth. It's very shallow, but they're on sloped land. So water will go down the sloped land into these smiles, and then it gives the earth the chance to actually absorb the water.
So I look at this thing and listen to this new idea. If you were in, let's pick country, Thailand, and they have properties that have terraces.
Yeah.
Well, those are big smiles.
Yeah.
They've been able to figure this out hundreds and thousands of years ago.
I know.
So
that's why I'm saying we're so far behind.
Well, but again, we know they must have been discussing it. We know if you've met some of the people like Lucien Dene and the Sierra Club and Maui tomorrow, and groups that have been on these subjects for so long.
Yeah.
Why hasn't it happened? Money.
Yeah.
Isn't that it?
Well, even then, earth smiles are so, like, they're natural. You're not, like, putting in, say, concrete to build a reservoir or something. All you have to do is dig.
Move the land.
Yeah, that's all you have to do. You could do it by hand. Obviously, I'm not saying you should do that without, funds. But it doesn't cost as much as it would cost to build a reservoir. It's natural. It's bringing water back to places that don't have water. I mean, part of the biggest reasons that Kihei and Lahaina have these wildfire issues is because there's nothing holding water there. We don't, we don't grow produce there. We don't have, in Lahaina in particular, they cut down a lot of trees before building in that area. We used to have, streams coming down, before the islands were colonized and everything. And, it was thriving there. And then they cleared it all out. They put what is Lahaina there today. And then they didn't make any plans for the future to prevent, how it dried up. Instead, if we put these earth smiles into the ground, they don't have to be big. I mean, they could be like 2 to 5 feet long. They don't have to be big at all.
Quite a few of them.
Yeah, quite a few. But
lots of smiles.
Yeah, lots of smiles. But I mean, they're easy to implement. They're natural. They won't cause like excessive damage to the lower lying cities like a reservoir would.
Again, I'm only stopping you to say, because I hear you are a fountain of good ideas. Right?
Well, I like
seriously. That's important that I'm seeing, because like I said, I don't want to count you out. Yeah. But I know that what I think is important, that the public see and hear your ideas. And if they all vote for you, it would be terrific, because you can't do anything in a vacuum anyway.
Yep.
That's where we started this conversation with.
And
all your ideas have to be adopted.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it'd definitely be cheaper than, the reservoir or dam situation that
it is a dam situation.
Like, a dam has its merits, but we've seen this in Oahu. They had a dam that could potentially break because of the excessive rain. If Bison wants to implement a dam above Kihei, how are you going to guarantee that that's not going to break and destroy that town? But with water smiles, and you got to say it's man-made, water smiles at the base and then man-made watersheds above, you can reduce the risk to the town below while also bringing back a thriving environment.
So here I'm not really fighting you, but I'm
just
saying.
No worries.
So here
it's
we
okay.
are.
Here
we are. We have all these good ideas now. We say, okay, who's going to do it? Where are we going to get the money? Which other program? I know which programs are priority. That's where a mayor has to choose. Right?
Yep. And there's so many priorities.
There are so many priorities.
Yeah.
Well said.
Yeah. Well, my opponents, like my main 3 opponents, like to focus on housing, but you can't have housing if per se Kihei and Lahaina are still dry. You can't have housing if the environment is not taken care of. How are you going to guarantee that housing will still be there if you're not also focusing on the environment that could destroy that housing, like we've seen in Lahaina? When I was working there, I worked there for almost half a year, weighing the debris on the trucks. It was really hard. I was in the center of the burn zone watching them tear down all these homes and businesses, and I just couldn't help but think to myself, all of this would have been fixed if we were proactive against these issues. I mean, we already have volunteer groups that are out there doing the work to reforest these areas. But when I was there last time, during like taking the debris to Central Maui landfill, they were cutting down these forests. And I was just, I understand why you're cutting down these forests, but how are you going to ensure that you have these fire blockages? You know, like when you have forests that are green and like thriving and hydrated, it prevents fire from spreading. But now that they've cleared this out, how are you going to prevent this fire from spreading? What are you going to be doing to make sure that this land is green enough so fires don't spread as quickly as it did?
Well, I'm a fantasy person, like you.
Yeah.
Meaning, I keep thinking of great solutions, but I don't know how to pay for them.
Exactly.
And so that's why I'm glad I'm not them.
I know.
Or you.
Yep. I mean,
well, I mean, you're taking on a task
Mm-hmm.
that is quite formidable.
Yep.
And I'm really glad to see some. I don't know where you were before this. Were you a government? I mean, what got you so involved in all this?
Honestly,
stuff?
it was the fires. It was truly the fires. I mean, I didn't talk about it because I didn't want to make it about myself, but I also had to evacuate my home in Kula during those fires. I mean, I remember staying at my aunt's house in Haiku. No, not Haiku. I guess it would be kind of Haiku, like almost to Haiku. And I remember thinking to myself, do we have a home? Like, they didn't run those sirens at all. We only evacuated because we saw the fire across the road. And it was probably the hardest moment of my life. I mean, it's nowhere near the trauma other people have faced. But since that point, and since working in Lahaina, I've been studying. I've been, doing all this research, how much it could potentially cost, why we are so stagnant as an economy and socially. And, since I've been doing that, I just thought we could be doing better. We could be doing more. I mean, we had 40 years. We had 40 years to make a change. We didn't do that.
I know.
I know. But we have the opportunity to do it now. And the ideas presented by my main three opponents, they're not thinking of the future. They're only thinking of immediate gain. Not gain in like money, for example, but gain in, social presence. There's an old story about this man in Japan. He was also a mayor of his town. He built a tsunami wall that was higher than any other tsunami wall in Japan. They laughed at him. They told him, you wasted all our money on this. And then a massive tsunami came after he had already passed, and their town that had this high wall was one of the only few to actually survive the tsunami, because he was forward thinking about the future. Even though he got, hated on for it, even though they disgraced his name, they apologized after because he's the only reason their town survived. And that's something we also have to be thinking about as, we're here for the community. We are in service for the community. That's something we have to be thinking about. We have to be thinking about the future, even if that's after we pass. We can't just be thinking about immediate, reputation gain or,
Well, I'm sitting here triple your age.
Yeah.
It's hard to say, but triple your age. And I see the fire in your spirit. And I guess you'd say I've been beaten down over these years.
I think a lot of people
because
have been.
I'm the dreamer you are. I even have an organization called Dream Makers.
Oh, nice.
But you know what?
Mm-hmm.
Dreams and reality don't always
Yeah.
reconcile.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hoping that the ideas that you're giving here today will be embraced now.
Yep.
Because that's what I was saying when they opened this cultural center.
Exactly.
I was talking about it.
Good. Speak up.
Yes.
That's what we need. We
And
need
they
more people to
buried
speak.
me. You understand that?
Mm-hmm.
When I told you I ran years ago,
Yep, I remember.
they purposely cut me out and
Yep.
blocked me from being able to.
Well, if you look at the news, they only show those 3 people on the news. But I get it. They stand out. But it's clear what is, desired from certain people.
Well, I hope you'll take this tape and share it with people.
Yeah.
And hopefully you can get the support that you need to make yourself competitive in this race. And whatever happens, I hope that you'll stay involved in local government because we need. That's the biggest thing. I'm constantly crying. Where are the young people?
Yeah. You know what? I've been hearing that a lot. I'm here. I'm doing my best, and that's all we can really do.
No, and that I really very much appreciate and respect you for getting out there. You know, it's a big step.
Yeah. You know, all my ideas, they have a reference point. So even if they don't want to implement it, eventually we will have to, because it's successful in other places. I mean, if you look at Earth Smiles, you know, they show results in just 6 months. That's faster than building a dam. Much faster than building a dam. If we did the research and looked at new innovations, we could be having a much better life instead of putting all our focus on, you know, things that have shown to break and have to be removed down the line.
We've seen things, I'll give you an example, like there are technologies that could have handled the waste on the west side for a fraction of the cost that was spent. You know, why were they not approved or looked at by FEMA? Because they weren't on the approved technologies list.
You know what?
Technology has moved forward, and the systems that are in place to find the answers aren't including them yet.
You know what?
How crazy is it?
I know. You know, another thing I was doing my research on is called living shorelines. I looked at, you know, the rules and the laws for shoreline protection. They don't include the term living shorelines. Living shorelines includes, you know, for example, you have shore-based plants, native plants. We've seen them across the island. Those protect our shorelines from, you know, erosion. But they don't have the term living shorelines in their definitions, so they can't, you know, just focus on that. And in other places, they used recycled scallops and like clam shells as a way to protect beaches and what is it called? Like swamplands from erosion from the ocean. But because we don't have that terminology, that's not something we can really focus on when it's probably one of the best solutions we have. I mean, you can't just put hard infrastructure on these shorelines and say, oh, this is good enough. You have to actually put something that's living and will last.
You guys are hearing such fresh ideas. You appreciating them? Take a look at Amy's website. What's your website address?
It's Vote Petterson 2026. Petterson with 2 T's.
Petterson.
Yep.
So vote Petterson2026.com.
Yep.
Okay. So please, everyone, we've just taken a little time here. Thank you, Amy, for spending this time with me.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it was very long. We focused on more specific things, but there are many ideas that if people are interested, they can definitely go to my website and see all of it.
So anything that you'd like to make sure you mention before we leave? I don't want to cut you off.
I'd just say, use your voice. I mean, our voices, no matter how small you think they are, they bring change. Like, we have the power to make a difference across all generations. It doesn't matter how old you are, how young you are. If you speak, and if you speak together, you will be heard, and you will create the change you want to see.
Thank you so very much. Amy Petterson, running for mayor here in 2026. Vote Petterson2026.com.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Amy.
This was very nice.
Aloha.
Hello.